topic for today is a little bit the toolbox and a problem we have in social science. I wouldn't say a problem, but confusion. That we too often speak of methodology and actually refer to this, to the toolbox, i.e. to methods. There is a clear distinction, or should be a clear distinction, between the two. Methodology is not about methods. Methods are not about methodology. Of course, there is a link between them, but it's not simply identical. I see in many cases actually, if I get essays or theses or whatsoever, I see a chapter on methodology, and then I read something about questionnaires and surveys and document analysis and whatsoever. It would be beautiful if it would be as simple as that, but it isn't. What is a cat? You can't answer this question simply by applying a screwdriver or applying, I don't know what nice things, these toolboxes. A cat is a cat, of course. Right? If I ask this question, or if I turn to this, right, it's not right. It's not simply correct. It's not as simple as that. A cat is a fur. A cat is an animal with claws. So what you have is, what you see, it's a cat, but the essence of this beast is something different. And this is what academic work is about, to find out what is the essence of what we are looking at. I made available this quote and I think this is pointing out in a very clear way. Now it's difficult to read due to the size. I don't know how to work this computer.
Unten mit den beiden ziehen.
Here?
Nee, da müssen wir da hoch.
This one? Computers, right. All right. Well, it's not perfect, but it is actually legible. Now, I could say, of course, young people, they are able to do it. This is the essence of it, but this is just an example for how easy it is to deceive us. It's not about young people. My daughter probably would sit here in 2 days and not being able to figure it out. She's probably your age. Or something like this. So what is the essence? This is what we always have to look at. In this quote, you see this reference to this first instance. We see something. We see the population. This is very simple to figure out. There is and this is the point, there is a very diffuse thing. It seems to be concrete, all the people being together, but it is actually something very abstract. And there is this definition of the concrete as the concrete because it is the concentration of many determinations, hence unity of the diverse. So this is important to think about, to internalize into your thinking, that the concrete is not what you see, but it is this condensation of the multitude. Meaning it is about the essence, what is really behind it, what is the core of what we are looking at, what is the core of your research. You are looking at development and growth, or development versus growth. There is already something. It's not and, it is versus. There is a difference. What is development? Is it simply something moving from A to B, or from down to up, from the bottom to up? Or what is development? Is it about speed of development? This determines, actually, this intention to come to this essence, determines what we are looking at, determines our question. Meaning we can have different goals of our research. And we start, of course, with certain presumptions. These presumptions are, on the one hand, something that we think. We think growth is good. We think growth is bad. From wherever we have it, from our daily experience, from previous research. And we approach anything, we develop any question by actually looking at or applying a certain methodology we have already. And this methodology is very much about something we all value. So what do we value? I think I mentioned it briefly already, or implicitly. We value individuals. We, in our societies, we value individuals. Now, this is a fascinating thing. And it's permanently disputed, not because shouldn't we think about the other as well. It's not just about individuals, but it is the group. It is the other. This is one contestation. The other is, I'll give you a little bit of homework later. The other is this really something that is given once and forever? Is this what more specifically characterizes our European, not EU-European societies? There's a permanent quarrel, if you want, or dispute. We in the West, but actually we in the East, meaning Asian societies. Don't know if somebody lived or had been in China, for instance. It's a beautiful thing. And it's called we meal. We have a meal together. We sit. I remember even such a huge table, round. And then there is in the middle another table, meaning this turns around. And then there is food coming. There's a certain sequence to it and a certain order to it. What comes first and what comes then, and sometimes it changed. It changed 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. It was changing that the food comes in the beginning and not yeah. But the essence of it, if you want, is not what comes first, what comes later. The essence is that you have your different dishes and they are brought to you, or you can take them, meaning if I see something there, I can wait and I possibly manipulate it a little bit that it's coming faster. But it is this general agreement and gentleman agreement, gentlewoman agreement, people's agreement that you eat together. It takes a long time actually. Because you don't get your dish in front of you and eat. But you eat, you talk, you develop this common feeling, or you don't. And I remember I once joined one of these meals, and there was a colleague from Finland as well, and she wanted this. And she just turned the table around. Everybody was kind of shocked. But of course, as foreigners, you have a certain right of being stupid. Well, it is stupidity if you don't recognize, even if it was not right at the beginning, if you don't recognize this rule and recognize in terms of acknowledging it. So this is a long debate. We in the West, we get our single dish and eat, and we in the East, we have this feeling of commonality. There are different ways of developing this we, and there is of course this we as well in the West. It's interesting, it would be interesting, or it had been made probably, to just make a study on this. How you socialize during your meal together with others. And of course, this is hugely important in terms of what is the understanding of property. So you are not simply stopping there and say, well, we eat this way, we eat this way. But it is as well about property. It is about hierarchy. This is the trick. In the West, you eat until your dish, or it's of course simplified, if you eat until you are ready. In Asia, you eat, I experienced it, in an extreme case, somebody gets up and that's it. Because this is the sign we finished. And the somebody is the chief. There is so much implied. And we as researchers, we stand there and say, oh good God, what can I do with this? How do I deal with this complexity? To find out, it is the concentration of many determinations. It is about property, it is about hierarchy, it is about generations, it is about so many things. And there is a certain paradox, if you want. We have to know what we actually want to research. We want to find out what is the essential, but how can we do this without knowing actually, yes, this is the most important thing. So this is a very problematic or difficult, complex task, methodological task, and methodological presumption. What is what else do we value today? I'll come back later to this today. What else do we value? Actually, there is a slight idea I discussed with people from the base camp. They have these events in the evening sometimes and stuff. To have an event, to have a discussion or a talk about what does nation mean to you? The nation state. How do you feel? Do you feel as Turk, as, I don't know, from wherever you come? Do you feel as Turk or Kurd or Afghan Turk? If you moved from one country at very early stage and you are possibly born there, you didn't move but your parents moved. I faced this once in Ireland, going to a very remote restaurant. And the guy there, the owner, asked me, do you know so-and-so? I said, no. Should I? Yes, they are German. I said, well, but I don't know them. Well, the grandfather moved to Ireland. And I thought you would know them. The grandfather moved to Ireland. He thinks I should know them. Possibly the children didn't even know a single word German, or they knew German, but they had never been in Germany. They don't have any link to this country. I lost it over many years, that I don't know many things about political questions. Even if I'm hugely politically interested, active and involved in different even German networks all over the time via European work. I was surprised actually to see the election results yesterday. They voted in Hessia, and I was surprised to see the Greens with a huge result. The Greens had been kind of aggressively attacked at the time when I left Germany. These outsiders, they are coming there. They don't behave according to the standard rules. The nation is very important for us, if not personally, at least in terms of our thinking. We always refer to the nation state for good reasons. Because the growth or development of our country, the country where we live, matters to us. Third point, methodological individualism, methodological nationalism. Third point, it matters today. Presentism, we don't want a solution for in 10 years or in 100 years. We need a solution, an answer to questions that are important for us today. And this implies already the fourth point, methodological individualism, methodological nationalism, methodological presentism, now solutionism. They're different terms, pragmatism or whatsoever. In any case, we need a solution now. We need an answer now. This is the decisive thing, and this is guiding our search for this concentration, for what is essential. Of course, in different ways. the typical debate, sustainability, we have to look after the planet that our children and children's children can live on it. Before it was, what harms you? What's the point? We just have to do whatever we have to do. Energy, no question, we have it. Now, I dare to say, much of this concern for our children and children's children and whatsoever is not really about that question, what is happening in 100 years or in 200 years. But it is one keyword, it's peak oil, it's peak everything. We mention today in our nation states there is a limit, an absolute limit. We don't get oil, or a relative limit. It is getting so expensive that we cannot afford it. Or the consequences of overuse of certain fossil material is burdening us today and here. And you can see this, I wouldn't say it's the proof of my argument, but you can see this when you look at recycling procedures and then it's exported into other countries. So it is important, keeping this in mind, whenever you approach a question, whenever you try to develop a question, what is important and to which extent, at least this is the first question, to which extent is it justified, is it sufficient, or even to which extent do we refer to individualism, nationalism, solutionism, and presentism? Are we really considering enough that is going beyond this? Now you can say, of course, this individualism, nobody really, especially in social science, nobody really is convinced that this is the most relevant stuff we're talking about. Watkins' textbook, the ultimate constituents of the social world are individual people who act more or less appropriately in the light of their dispositions and understanding of their situation. Every complex social situation or event is the result of individuals, their dispositions, situations, beliefs, and physical resources and environment. Friedman, the famous economist, yeah, you can get famous with everything. Milton Friedman says it's simply about a collection of Robinson Crusoes, as it were. What is with Robinson Crusoe? How much was he an individual, independent, on his little island? Think of the Caribbean. He had all the tools with him. Not all the tools. No computers. Hadn't been even known. But for the time he lived in, he was well equipped. Not only with the tools, but as well with the knowledge. He wasn't sitting there and thinking, all right, this is what I do, this is what I build as an instrument, as a tool. But he could save many things on from the wrecked ship. This is social knowledge. even if there was nobody there, later Friday came. Fortunately, because then it's always Saturday and Sunday. He was on his own, and still he was a social being. Milton Friedman apparently doesn't want to get this. I said there was a Friday, and then there was, of course, a pun. But there is this point of he needed, for whatever reason, because he was a social being, he needed this orientation in time. I don't know if you know or remember the story. He had his calendar. If you are not used to this, you don't need it. He had his calendar, and he had his Saturday and Sunday, and he had his God. This was a social orientation that he could use. There's something else we appreciate, and you definitely heard about it, I guess. And this is welfare. Meaning with methodological individualism, we have actors. This is the individual. Everybody acts for him or herself, and the aggregate is something that is then social. That is this aggregate, or the social as aggregate. And of course there is this idea behind it, or with it, going with it, there must be a goal. Everybody wants to be better off. There is this idea of welfare, well-being, or whatsoever. And this is not possible. We end up with a situation that there is at least a mechanism in place that if everybody wants to be better off, we end up, at least in this way of thinking, we end up with what Thomas Hobbes had been talking about, the war of everybody against everybody else. If everybody wants to be better off, then I want to have this booklet, and I take it from you, and you want to have this, you take it from me, and what do? We fight about it. So we need an instance, the state, Leviathan. We need this instance to regulate us, to limit our self-interest. This is the idea. And we limit it in terms of this idea of welfare, and the engineer, he was not a communist, the engineer Wilfredo Pareto came up with this idea of we need an optimum that everybody is better off, or at least nobody, the situation of everybody is, or anybody is not worsening. Pareto optimum. So whatever we have in terms of development, whatever we have in terms of doing, of acting, the goal is this welfare optimum. Nobody should be worse off after we do etc. This is important as well in terms of what are we looking at? Is this justified? What is the essence of what we are looking at? Now we have actors, we have a goal, but we don't have actors. Who is doing what? And there we come back actually to the first point. There are different ways of approaching this, but the one point is the tragedy of the commons. That actually everybody having commons, having something in common, having common property, everybody tries. That's the idea. Everybody tries to get as much out of it as possible, not looking for the welfare of others, not looking at what happens with the other. And then we have this problem, if you want, or the question, is this true? What is actually, if I have grassland, and this was the original idea, what happens if everybody can bring his sheep, her sheep there? People trying to get as much as possible out of it. Everybody trying to get as much as possible out of it, which means you overuse the resources. This is the one idea. And then there had been many arguments against it. That A, you will have, I don't know, Earthstream, you will have different approaches to regulate what you're doing. If you see somebody is using more than others, then you say no. And up to a certain point you simply say no. And at some stage you say, this is not possible. You have a quota of such and such, which will be calculated by what we all need. It's not necessarily the quota everybody gets the same, but everybody gets according to. And this is then, of course, the question. You have these in the mountains where cattle are brought into the mountains on a common ground. And of course, the stronger, the richer farmer gets more space there. He can bring up, I don't know these dimensions there, 50 cattle, and the others only 20. And they have one person looking after them. So it is a different, it is a difficult thing, but it is important to keep this in mind, that we always deal with the two things. We are looking for what is important, and we apply specific criteria. And we always have to try to figure out what are actually the really important criteria that we apply. Meaning, is it sufficient that we talk about individuals? There is one further thing, and this is making things more exciting. That's the one way to see it. And it is making things more difficult. It's Brodel, it's a school if you want. I mentioned it, the Immanuel Wallerstein World Systems Theory, André Gunther Frank, many others. This is a kind of the original, or the origin, standing at the beginning. A French school, Fernand Brodel. He was trying to figure out how is this world system actually working. And it is working especially, or not least, in a historical perspective or with a historical perspective. Coming back to what I said earlier, this is what happens now, what the presentism. History, short-term history. We do this, we elect this government, we throw this government out of office or whatever. And then we end up with a short-term history. He has 3 planes, 3 perspectives, and says there is this one of immediate, it's usually we don't even speak about history, of a short-term realm, and then there is a long-term perspective that we actually say this is what I said before, leaving a country, coming back 20 or 30 years later. I say there's something different, right? They speak basically the same language. They behave more or less in the same way, but there are many things as well that changed. It is sometimes a very important change. Sometimes it's kind of invisible, but then there are certain situations where we hesitate and say, oh, hang on. This is not what we did when I had been young. And you will probably know many things like this, where you say, actually, no, when I had been young, and you are still young, but even there you say, when I had been young, this was not how things had been done, how we behaved, or what the government would say. More or less fundamental changes. And then you have this long-term thing, I mentioned it directly, indirectly, we Europeans, we in the West. What it is, nobody knows. There are these traditions, we appreciate the individual. And then you can go back to Montesquieu or the Enlightenment, Immanuel Kant, Descartes, this idea of intellectual enlightenment. There is a funny situation of the Western Enlightenment. It had been for a long time said, we in the West are enlightened and the others are not. Now there is a differentiation of the Western Enlightenment, the Eastern Enlightenment, the Southern Latin American Enlightenment, or whatever. Be aware of it, that things change as well in history. Whenever you look at your question, be aware of where are you, on which plane are you, on which level of history are you? Is it just analyzing this, what happens today, or is it something that is part of a long, really long historical perspective? Something that is usually forgotten, and something that is then leading to misjudgments, to wrong judgments, to wrong conclusions. This is what I really want you to be aware of and to apply. When you think about a question, it's not about description, it is about finding out what is essential. A description is very easy, but what is the essential part of it? This is difficult, and this is the matter of the question, not the answer. And then to look at and make clear at what is actually relevant in terms of history. Is it something that matters today and only today? It's as well the question, can we actually change something? In political science we have this term of path dependency, saying we cannot simply change. People who are convinced that the individual is the most important We cannot say, no, from today it changes. From today it's society. And this is what you find in many political processes today, especially in Turkey, in Hungary, here in Poland as well, that there are changes that are of course important for today. But then you could say, okay, we get another government, if we are not happy with it, we get another government and then we change back again. If you change to a presidential system, you cannot change immediately and say no. We don't have a presidential, we voted another government, we get rid of this presidential system. It is such a huge change. And actually it will not have immediate effect. There are some effects immediately visible, but the more important is you cannot go back, and in the long run it will change things. And the long run is now not the third level but the second level. You see it with the Thatcherite revolution, with the Reaganomics or something. There was at some stage this reorientation of all economic politics. It was about what is called neoliberalism, and to get rid of it was impossible. There was something striking. I remember the Thatcherite revolution, if you want, and all this. And then I was sitting for dinner after a workshop meeting with colleagues, and there was one colleague from the UK. This was just a week after the Blair government came into power. And she said, yes, great. This is now a fundamental change. Now we are really out of this Thatcherite politics, which actually was not Thatcherite only, there was major afterwards. And I said, Sue, sorry, hang on. Let's talk about this question in 2 years or in 4 years. And unfortunately, I had been right. He continued the same politics under a different name, and this was actually what the Financial Times said just before the elections. They said, we need another government, we need a social democratic, a Labour government, because the Conservatives will ruin the country. They lost legitimacy. If now the same, this is Financial Times, they are intelligent people, if now the same politics is made by some progressives, then it will be accepted. And this is what happened. It took a long time that you have had, or that you have now these quarrels of Britain searching for, at least searching for a way. Unfortunately, they are, in my opinion, searching in the wrong direction. One thing at the end of this, before I open it, is to question as well, and we will come back to it later. I would like you to look at the one text that you find on the internet. You should, of course, look at all texts. It's not much. It's 5 pages. I would like to discuss it with you next time, that you discuss it, that you bring up your thoughts in terms of what does it, or how do you interpret this? Burckhardt, the writer, is supposedly one of the most important historians looking at Renaissance. Basically saying, and this is a little bit what we talked about, it was the time when the individual had been reinvented, the importance of the individual. And this was a sea change in history with the Renaissance, that it basically established the foundation of our capitalism that we have today, independent of the different shapes. But the idea of capitalism had been laid there. So this is what I would like you to have a look at.